this is the process that has seen the commodification of water, electricity, internet, and soon oxygen will follow suit.
I'm in Mpumalanga in a rural area. I'm using expensive mobile data provided by one of the monopolies Comrade Trader was telling us about.
The key shock for me is, having gone through all of this, the argument is government needs to work with the private sector to deliver this. It's that very same link with the private sector that's caused the failure itself, yet we are being told that government has no capacity, capability, or competence to deliver.
In terms of device gap, we see that there is a gap between urban and rural, the one which is in black. 71% of smartphone owners are actually urban dwellers, and then 29%, only 29% in rural. And then we see the access to the internet as well, between those who use smartphones and those who use other devices across age, for those 16 to 34 and then 35 and above. South Africa, one of the most talked about issue in South Africa is the differences in the racial disparities. And we can see here, because of the historical apartheid in South Africa, we see that most of the white population actually had access to the internet compared to the blacks. And the one which we see in terms of Indian has been attributed to the least number of participants that we got from the Indian population. So the internet usage, you see that there's still a gender gap in internet use between men and women across, where 57% of men access the internet compared to 49% of women, and 61% of urban participants having access to the internet compared to rural participants.
Why zero rating is important to us. We believe as an organization that apartheid structural barriers also play a factor in this issue, in that there's still a certain level of poverty, huge level of poverty and marginalization, and the issue of the internet and data almost plays a critical part in that nexus. It does not take us out of poverty. In fact, it's creating it adds to the weight of poverty in our country, and therefore we need to almost see it in that lens or that perspective as well. Secondly, if we get this issue of mobile technology and access correct, we almost are going to get to a point where we leapfrog some of these barriers. Imagine if someone could have easily access to the internet, they are able to look for a job, they're able to access education quite quickly and swiftly. And so it is almost a small nugget that with the right level of action at the state level, we could be able to move our country forward hundreds of years forward.
Also, one of the previous speakers spoke a lot about the zero rating of public service benefit organizations. There are some problems with zero rating, however, and these are personal concerns that I have. One of them is technical, and that is that a zero-rated website may pull in content from non-zero rated websites, services, images, scripts, whatever the case might be. And so you've got to be very careful that with a zero-rated environment, you don't create a two-tier internet where those who are accessing zero-rated sites cannot get access to all of the content on those sites, or end up being charged for content that they didn't know that they were going to have to pay for. So that's one of the challenges that needs to be addressed. There's also a challenge related to the issue of net neutrality, which is why some jurisdictions have made the idea of zero rating or turned back from the idea of zero rating, because it does fly in the face of net neutrality. It creates a walled garden, and the previous speaker alluded to some of the challenges with that, is that people want to be on the inside of that garden. If your website is listed as zero rated, it's of great benefit to you. So there's a lot of pressure from people to try and get into that garden, which means there needs to be a gatekeeping process by which applications are scrutinized and either approved or rejected. And that creates a difficult issue and a difficult maintenance issue, which will need to be resolved. A third area that came out of the Competition Commission's recommendation was the question of free lifeline data, making available to either individual SIM cards or to households, as currently seems to be the debate, the public debate, a certain amount of data free per month, in the same way that a certain amount of water and a certain basic amount of electricity is made available to households. And people on the call here in South Africa may well have heard the minister speaking about trying to make or planning to make 10 megabytes of data available per family per month. I beg your pardon, 10 gigabytes of data per family per month.
Free internet and quality internet are two different things. So if we are going to push for free internet, we must be careful not to create more digital divides, because those who have free internet might not have the same capabilities with people that are having quality internet, which they pay for, which means our people are going to remain consumers of the internet instead of active participants in the economy. I would also like us to reflect on the balance between free and sustainable internet, because I can tell you now that it costs money to run even a community network. So if people are not going to pay anything, then we know that our interventions are going to be short-lived.
Corporations are more powerful than governments in this respect. Governments do pass weak policies as well. So GDPR in Europe, even our Promotion of Access to Information Act and PAPAIA, they're very weak laws to start off with because of the lobby and various reasons. Corporations also pay the government to make sure laws are weak. But I'd wager even if the laws were stronger, corporations just wouldn't respect them, because at the end of the day, we're all using Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. Their immense power and control over us makes it easy for them to overrule what local governments are doing, especially governments outside of the US. The South African government doesn't have much teeth against these large tech corporations. So the next thing that's going to happen is, as more companies get really good at surveillance, the competition will drive companies to take more risks to outcompete other corporations. So if there's many corporations collecting data and a client wants to buy data, they're going to buy the best data set. So corporations will try to be more invasive so that their data can outcompete other corporations who are also collecting. So you might think, the corporation is not collecting that much, but eventually the profit incentive is going to force corporations to become more and more invasive and to do things which are very unethical, and they're going to become more and more dishonest. If every corporation told you that they're collecting data, you might not use that corporation and use a different one. So now the for-profit motive means corporations will lie to you. It also means they'll try their best to hide data collection, in innocent astrology chart apps and stuff like that, so that you don't actually know that you're giving personal information to a client, because the more aware you are of the process, you're less likely to give that information.
The thing about that spyware is it's probably the most scary stuff that we're thinking about at the moment when we talk about state surveillance. It is incredibly invasive. It's being used against opposition politicians, against journalists, against human rights activists in Southern Africa. But it's also incredibly expensive. And so in some ways, a lot of this most invasive software, the biggest control against it is just the states can't really afford it to be as invasive as they would like to be. And with the network operators, generally, and there's an increasing trend towards wherever a government agency wants to use information that it gets from a network operator, it needs to go through a court and get the permission of a judge.
Information, the protection of personal information forms an element of safeguarding people's right to privacy. It's the legal protection of people where your personal information is collected, stored, or used, or communicated. In South Africa, the right to privacy is protected in terms of the common law, so the law that isn't written down in legislation or in the Constitution, but it's also protected in the Constitution itself in Section 14. The recognition and protection of the right to privacy as a fundamental human right provides an indication of how important it is. It's not an absolute right. It may be limited by a law of general application. It has to be balanced with other rights. It's one of the reasons the information regulator was set up, to regulate both the right to privacy and the right to access to information, because they're two sides of the same coin. You don't want your personal information made available inappropriately, but on the other hand, you do want transparency. So how do you get both? The best of all possible worlds. And the argument, I think, is that one of the ways of doing that is put those powers in one regulator and see if they can do that balancing act.
So clearly, they put you through a maze to chase around. So citizens who are already marginalized, as you've heard here, through load shedding, historic inequalities of housing, water supplies, etc., suffer a lot more. And then, of course, when they try to resist, they're spied upon. Now, I think what is left for me here is to look at what we can do going forward, right? We can lament here and argue how our government are increasingly trying to censor us using the Phones and Publications Board. But how many of us are engaged in those processes? So the first thing I want to suggest is that we need to try and come together to build the media and communications commons, this digital commons. We should come together as the first point, as we are doing it today, and to deepen it in local levels and in provinces, right? But it has to be democratic. It has to be bottom up. It cannot be imposed by those who are techno-savvy, who know more than us. We've got to speak a simple language that people can understand. It also must include a people-centered SABC. And here we need to decide what it is: the free-to-air TV stations, community television, community radio, and all of them must be transformed.